Week 4 is officially under wraps, and today I'll be bringing forth my top waiver ads entering Week 5 of fantasy football. We went through a few of these names on yesterday morning's live stream, but I wanted to get you guys an in-depth top 10 when you guys make your waiver claims this week. So if you guys enjoy, make sure you leave a like down below. Comment your biggest waiver wire decision of the week. I'll try to get to as many as possible. And of course, if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. We are on the road to 40,000 subscribers. I appreciate you guys for that continued support. But with that being said, let's get into it. All right, before I get into my official top 10, I want to go through the guys that should be rostered in your league, but in case they aren't, make sure you go pick up guys that are rostered in over 50% of sleeper leagues. But again, if they are available, they would figure into this top 10 list. Starting off with Romeo Doubs, wide receiver of the Green Bay Packers. Big time performance in week 4 against the Detroit Lions. Looks to be a consistent part of that Packers game plan. Is their lead target to start this year. Even with Christian Watson coming back, I think he's going to operate as that second outside wide receiver. Jaden Reed being the slot, Romeo Doubs being the possession guy, and Christian Watson being the do-it-all #1 wide receiver that can work down the field. CJ Stroud, quarterback of the Houston Texans. If you're in a pinch, you need a quarterback. CJ Stroud is by far the best option available if he is on your waiver wire. He looks very good. Rookie quarterback is already getting acclimated to the NFL. And this Houston Texans offense has a lot more upside than people initially anticipated coming into the season. Quentin Johnson, wide receiver of the LA Chargers. Again, he should be rostered in your league, but maybe somebody's a little upset about his performance in week 4. Maybe they drop him to the wire. Still one of the best upside stashes in the entirety of fantasy football, working in that Chargers offense with Justin Herbert, who has been the quarterback 1 so far in fantasy. Tyler Boyd, wide receiver of the Cincinnati Bengals. T. Higgins got banged up with that rib injury in this week's game. We've seen that when Jamar Chase misses time, T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd run the show. When T. Higgins misses time, Tyler Boyd and Jamar Chase run the show. So Tyler Boyd, you can expect 6, 7, 8, 9 plus targets per week from Joe Burrow. We just got to hope that Joe Burrow starts looking like Joe Burrow anytime soon. And finally, Tyler Higbee, tight end of the LA Rams. The LA Rams offense has looked really solid to start this year, way higher than the expectations I had for them coming in. Despite not having Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua showed out. Matt Stafford is still one of the top 10 quarterbacks, in my opinion, in the entire NFL. And Tyler Higbee is a consistent option in this offense. I think he's the #2 target as of now, behind Puka Nacua until Cooper Kupp comes back. But now we go on to number 10, and that's going to start off with Terrace Marshall, wide receiver of the Carolina Panthers. And he's actually quietly commanded 6+ targets in 3 out of his 4 games this year. He hasn't been insanely efficient, but outside of Adam Thielen right now, the Panthers offense has been needing weapons to be able to contribute. And he looks like he has a stranglehold right now as the second top target earner on this offense behind Thielen. Chark technically has more snaps right now, but he's kind of operating that Marcus Valdes-Scantling role where his value to the offense is more so stretching the field rather than earning targets. Only earned 3 targets despite running the most routes on the team this week. Terrace Marshall, he looks like he can be that possession wide receiver next to Adam Thielen. Is still young, still has some upside. Jonathan Mingo dealing with a concussion, and even when Mingo was healthy, he did not look very good. So I think Bryce Young is still an elite talent. Was a #1 overall pick for a reason, where if he starts playing well, if it starts looking like the Houston Texans situation where the rookie quarterback's playing well, the offense as a whole is getting better as the season goes along, I think that Terrace Marshall can be a consistent part of this offense, especially more so in deeper leagues. You're not really going to get him if you're in a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex type of league, but you're in 2 wide receivers, 2 flex, 3 wide receivers, 2 flex, and you need some wide receiver depth. I think Terrace Marshall can figure to be a top 50-ish level option moving forward. And in terms of fab, I'd be willing to spend on Terrace Marshall. I'd be willing to put in about 0 to 5%. I'm not willing to, spend up the budget, but you need some depth. Maybe you want to put, a few bucks on him. I wouldn't mind that in deeper leagues. Number 9 is going to be Zay Jones, wide receiver of the Jacksonville Jaguars. 13 targets in the 2 healthy games he's played this year, and he's missed the last 2 games with a knee injury, unfortunately. Again, he's more of a stash right now. I don't want to put him in my lineup once he gets returned from that knee injury. I want to see how he plays at least a week afterwards, but at the same time, you still have a lot of upside here. Working with Trevor Lawrence, working with that Jaguars offense, we expect it to fully bounce back. Showed some signs of life against the Atlanta Falcons this past week in London, and when Zay Jones returns, he's going to be a top 2 wide receiver in terms of route participation on this team. He played 89% of the team snaps in week 1, 5 receptions, 55 yards, caught that touchdown from Trevor Lawrence, and I expect him to be a viable wide receiver 4 in deep leagues. Again, like I said, with Terrace Marshall, if you're in a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex league, there's no real need to go out there and get a guy like Zay Jones, but as soon as you have to start some more wide receivers, maybe 3 wide receivers, 2 flexes, 2 wide receivers, 2 flexes, Zay Jones, like I said, can give you a top 45-ish level baseline. And similar to Terrace Marshall, I'd be willing to spend about about 5% when it comes to Zay Jones on the waiver wire this week. Number 8 is going to be Jake Ferguson, tight end of the Dallas Cowboys, and he's the clear-cut tight end for the Cowboys right now. Despite the offense being in some very positive game scripts so far, in 3 of their 4 games, the defense has absolutely dominated, which the offense hasn't had to do much. Ferguson has commanded 25 targets in these first 4 games. It's clear that Dak trusts him as the safety valve of this offense. He's nearly filling the entire Dalton Schultz role already, and if you're in need of a tight end, Jake Ferguson is currently a high-volume target on one of the most efficient offenses in the NFL, despite the bad game script so far. He's a tight end 8 in fantasy. Cowboys schedule will start to open up against some stiff competition moving forward. Next few games, they play the 49ers, the Chargers, the Rams, the Eagles. Like, they're not going to be able to just completely dominate these teams defensively. Like we've seen in the first 4 games, the Cowboys have scored 4 defensive touchdowns. While that's fantastic as a Cowboys fan, I love seeing my defense score. Realistically, that's not sustainable moving forward. The offense will be able to put up some more points with the defense not dominating at the level they are right now. And with the tight end position being all over the place in fantasy right now, disappointments, injuries, week 5 buys, I think Jake Ferguson figures not only as a sneaky tight end 1 option this week, but potentially moving forward. I'd be willing to spend upwards of 5 to 10% of my fab to secure Jake Ferguson from the wire this week. Moving on to number 7 is Marvin Mims, wide receiver of the Denver Broncos, a guy I'd be willing to spend up to 5 to 10% of my fab on. He is the ultimate lottery ticket edition. If you're a 3-1 team, you're a 4-0 team, you can afford to wait on some elite upside. Marvin Mims presents that on the wire this week. He's been unironically one of the most efficient wide receivers in the entire NFL to start the year, and Sean Payton simply has not been phased yet. He has not given him the assortment of snaps he deserves based on how well he's been playing. Marvin Mims currently leads the Denver Broncos in snaps, despite being 5th on the team in targets. Only 11 targets, and he's been able to produce 242 receiving yards on them. And like Ryan Heath says here, someone who's good at coaching, please help me budget this, because I honestly don't understand it, man. This guy's this productive, this talented, and yet he's only getting 11 targets so far because he's not being used on the field. However, we did see some strides to him potentially being the wide receiver 3 on this team. He tied Brandon Johnson in terms of routes run this past week. I will always bet on this type of player. The only problem with him right now is inadequate coaching from Sean Payton. He's not running enough routes. As soon as he gets those routes, and guess what? If he keeps being this efficient, he will earn those routes in the long term. I think he's got the upside to be a top 24 option. Not only has he checked off every single other box aside from playing time, he has downright smashed it. Again, one of the most efficient wide receivers in the NFL as a rookie. He needs to be picked up, especially if you're in an advantageous situation where you don't need the production right away. Number 6 is Jaleel McLaughlin of the Denver Broncos, a guy I'd be willing to spend 5 to 10% of my fab on. Javonte Williams, big news of the weekend. He goes down with a hip injury he suffered in week 5 against the Chicago Bears. And like Jeff Mueller says here, he expects him to miss 1 to 2 weeks with the injury. And after Williams was ruled out, we saw McLaughlin work as the 2 in terms of overall snaps behind Samaje Perine. But he actually out-touched Perine and was far more efficient on a per-touch basis than Samaje Perine. He showed the type of explosive ability the backfield didn't have with 2 power backs taking the hold with Javonte Williams and with Samaje Perine in the past. And I do think this is a guy that could potentially work towards the RB2 role even when Javonte Williams comes back based off the archetype of player he is. Obviously, like I said, Javonte Williams more of that power between the tackles back. Jaleel McLaughlin giving you a little bit more juice out of the backfield than what Samaje Perine represents. For the short term, while Javonte Williams is out, I think this is going to be a relative 50-50 committee. But even when, like I said, Javonte Williams comes back, I think Jaleel McLaughlin has an opportunity to become the RB2 on this team. The problem with Jaleel McLaughlin right now is a lot of your league mates might see him as the number 1 on this list when Javonte Williams, like I said, is only going to miss 1 to 2 weeks. I think Javonte Williams, once he comes back, will be the RB1 on this team. Jaleel McLaughlin, while I still think could potentially get involved, like I said, as the RB2, someone in your league might bid, 20, 25+% of their fab. I'm only willing to bid about 5 to 10% because I do see the flaws when it comes to picking up Jaleel McLaughlin. Number 5 pickup of the week is going to be Tyjae Spears, running back of the Tennessee Titans, a guy I'd be willing, again, to spend 5 to 10% of my fab on. And he's still one of the most efficient backs when I called him a pickup in week 2. He is one of my favorite implied upside backs in the entirety of fantasy. And the reason why I'm really high on him from an implied value standpoint is that he has a true 3-down skill set he's displayed so far this year. He's averaging over 3 targets per game and running the ball incredibly well. Derrick Henry, as we know, still the same 250-pound, 29-year-old running back with nearly 2,000 career touches under his belt. And to start the year, he's been more efficient than we could have expected from the King coming in. If the King were to succumb to this workload moving forward, I think Tyjae Spears has the upside to be a legitimate RB2 in fantasy. He's a passing down running back. He showed he can be efficient on the ground, and he's already commanding snaps on this team. If Derrick Henry were to miss any time, like I said, I think he has the opportunity to be a league winner. Number 4 pickup of the week is going to be Chuba Hubbard, running back of the Carolina Panthers. Very similar archetype to that of Tyjae Spears. 5 to 10% is what I'd be willing to bid. Week 4 against the Vikings, we did see Chuba Hubbard handle the majority of the snaps and routes over Miles Sanders. However, Miles Sanders did enter the contest with a banged up groin, so I wouldn't take too much away from it based solely off the week 4 usage. But the reason why I'm buying into Chuba is not because of this usage, but more so the fact what he's been able to do in relation to Miles Sanders in this backfield this year. He's been much more efficient than Sanders throughout the year. He outranks him in terms of PFF grade, true yards per carry, yards per touch, breakaway run rate, and yards created per touch. Chuba Hubbard has simply just been the more efficient running back compared to Miles Sanders this year, and he's flat out played like one of the best running backs in the NFL from an efficiency standpoint. And the implied value here is that should he take more work from Sanders moving forward, whether that's because of play, whether that's because maybe he re-aggravates that groin injury in the next couple weeks, Chuba Hubbard, like I said with Tyjae Spears, would become a fantasy football running back too. Again, 5 to 10% is what I'd be willing to bid. Wouldn't be willing to bid much more. If your league mates wanting to put in 15, 20, 25+%, I will be out on Chuba Hubbard. But for the right price, I am absolutely in because I think he's a good player. Number 3 pickup of the week is going to be Wan'Dale Robinson, wide receiver of the New York Giants. I would be willing to spend upwards of 15 to 20% of my fab on him moving forward, and here's why. In his second full game back from last season's Week 11 ACL tear, he earned the full-time slot role for this Giants team in Week 4, ran 32 of the team's 51 routes, 6 targets in that frame, 1 carry as well. It was clear that when he was on the field, the Giants made a concerted effort to get the ball in his hands, and he looked good. He looked explosive in space. The knee clearly wasn't affecting him much, and I'm willing to buy in on the most talented wide receiver on this team. Who's the easiest target for DJ to hit consistently behind this train wreck of an offensive line? Again, the offensive concerns are a risk, but I do think the volume upside here is absolutely massive when it comes to Wan'Dale Robinson. Like I said, 15 to 20%. I'm always willing to bet on young wide receivers that showed this level of upside early on. And Wan'Dale Robinson is a guy I think can figure into the top 30 of wide receiver rankings moving forward if he continues to see this level of involvement. Number 2 is going to be Michael Wilson, wide receiver of the Arizona Cardinals. Very similar case to that of Wan'Dale Robinson I'll get into in a second. 15 to 20% of my fab I'd be willing to spend on Michael Wilson. And he had by far his best game as a pro this week. He caught all 7 of his targets, 76 receiving yards, and 2 receiving touchdowns from Josh Dobbs. And after losing his starting role from weeks 1 to 2, his snaps dropped from 90 to 43% in that time. His usage in the last 2 games, weeks 3 and 4, have seen an uptick since that 43% snap share. We know Marquise Brown should be the one based on usage, but Michael Wilson is already close to him when it comes to production. 2.48 yards per route run according to Player Profiler. He's been ultra efficient on a team that's been much more competitive than we could have anticipated coming into the season. Again, this is just a philosophy of mine. Betting on young, efficient rookie wide receivers to increase their involvement as the season goes along has always been a winning bet for me in fantasy, and I think Michael Wilson is the next one in line. Again, 15 to 20%. If you have to go maybe 21, 22 to make sure you get him, I'm fine with that. But I do believe the hype when it comes to Michael Wilson. I think he can be a mainstay in the top 40 of my wide receiver rankings moving forward if he continues to display this level of talent. And finally, my number 1 waiver wire pickup of the week is going to be Jameson Williams of the Detroit Lions. I will spend upwards of 15 to 20% on him as well. And he's a very polarizing player. We haven't been able to consistently play on a football field since the 2021 collegiate season at Alabama. He played in 6 games at the tail end of the 2022 season after returning from his ACL tear he suffered in the national title game, but he never crossed 20% of the snaps in any single one of those games. Fast forward this offseason, obviously gets down with that gambling issue. Initially supposed to be suspended for 6 games. But as we saw last week, that suspension got reduced to 4 games, meaning he is eligible to return for week 5. While I don't blame anybody for being a bit nervous about this situation here, due to the lack of football he's played in the pros, but he's still that absolutely dynamic wide receiver we saw at Alabama, the guy that went 12th overall, the guy that was the wide receiver 4 selected in the 2022 NFL draft. And I think he has the element of the Lions offense that they need in a big way right now. They have Amon-Ra St. Brown. They have Sam Laporta to be the consistent chain movers. Jameson Williams brings a game-breaking speed that they currently don't have on this roster. And I get it. He's definitely risky, but this could be potentially the cheapest we see him all year. If he develops into the player that they took him to be, again, 12th overall pick, very productive out of Alabama. This guy not only has the ability to be the best waiver for this week, I think he has the opportunity to be one of the best waivers of the entire season. So with Jameson Williams, top 24 level upside if he hits it, but he is a little bit riskier than the other top options on the waiver wire this week. However, we don't play scared. We're going for the upside. Again, 15 to 20%. And if you have to go, 21, 22, I'm fine with that. But realistically, Jameson Williams is one of the biggest lottery tickets of the entire waiver wire season. But either way, if you guys enjoyed, like I said, make sure you leave a like down below. Comment your biggest waiver wire decisions in the comment section. And of course, if you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button. We are on the road to 40,000. I appreciate you guys for that continued support. But with that being said, peace out. Good luck in your week 5 matchups.